Hi everyone, I'm here with Karen Giuffre, the director of the Voyager Community School. My name is Peter Swain, and you're watching us on hackmankind.com. Karen, it's great to see you. How are you doing?
Yeah, terrific. Sun finally came out here in New Jersey, in the US of A, and things are good. Things are
And
good.
your background's changed. You've moved, I understand.
I have moved. Yes, we have sold a farm and moved over to a smaller home and property and off the water. And I'm looking at the river right now. It's pretty fine. Yeah.
That's a beautiful view. So, obviously, I mean, we're filming this at a fairly uncertain time, would be a good way to put it. And I don't want to discuss the larger issues of racism in society with you. We've discussed that with other people on the panelists. What I would like to talk about is that under the lens of children. So as you know, I have a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old, and they see things and they hear things. How do I talk to them about what's happening?
Great question. And I've pondered it a lot. Certainly over these last weeks with the George Floyd murder and the uprisings, peaceful protest and related uprisings in the midst of what was already trying for children with a pandemic and talking mommy and daddy fearing losing a job and unemployment and all those things. Yeah, there's a lot on children's minds, and racism is one of those very, very important topics. So I come from a perspective that children should not be sheltered, that children cannot be sheltered, that in this world with social media and TV and conversation around them, they're well aware of what's going on, and they're worried or they're questioning. They're quietly concerned and maybe they're stressed. And yes, you do need to talk to them about all sorts of things. And quite frankly, you need to talk to them about racism. It struck me, about a week ago, I think you had Joseph McClellan III on, and he spoke quite eloquently on this topic. And he talked about the fact that we need to talk rather than to hide. That often we don't say anything because we're afraid we'll say the wrong thing, but saying nothing is equivalent to doing nothing. And doing nothing is not acceptable in this time, in this period. I thought it was also striking that he mentioned that this young generation is the least racist generation. Yes, they see color, and we all see color, but they don't see the discrimination. They don't feel it in their hearts necessarily. Now that's a generalization and maybe not across the board, but our children are less likely now to see differences in terms of how they interact with other people or who they should interact with. So I thought those were really key and poignant points for us to absorb. For me, I believe that you speak to your children about care and regard for others, and you speak to your children about critical hope. And this is a term that I've been using very frequently, particularly over the last couple of months. I'm not necessarily a fan of hope because I think often when people reach out and say, I hope for, they're almost looking for somebody else to do something for them. But when I'm talking about critical hope, I'm talking about the hope that drives us to action, to take action. In your case, it drives you to take action in terms of speaking to your children about the topic. And hoping that you can make differences in how they see the world and how they interact and what they take responsibility for, and how freely they, among others, and move among others and help others, right? So that they become more of an active, they have an active view on social justice, a value in social justice, and rather than a bystanding sort of perspective. So that's what I hope for. I hope that we can instill this critical hope that moves children to be actively engaged. So what does that mean? Like, how do you parent that, right? And so I believe it starts with conversation. I believe it starts with life experiences. um, and helping your child to sort through what they're not sure of. But clearly you want to say, there's not a place in our home, there's not a place in our hearts for racism. There's not a place in our home and there's not a place in our heart for the violence that has become part of the racist act or the act of racism. And I think it's also very important to listen deeply to yourself as well as to your children, because we have biases.
Well, we do, and this is something that actually myself and Liz, my wife, spoke to our school about, because we asked them, you know, what are you doing on this? Where do you stand on this? Because a friend of mine in school has taken an incredibly assertive role, and I'll talk about that in a second. Yeah. And they said, "Oh, well, as you know, we don't see color," and we went, "That's not good enough." Right? So I'm like, well, and what we're trying to explain to them was, and I know this is a technology, so it has been proven that policing is obviously algorithmically based. Where should we put policemen is decided by computers. You decide where you put police, obviously, in quotes, obviously, by where there are being crimes committed. So if there's more crimes committed here than here, you put policemen here, you don't put policemen there. But even if those police then aren't racist, right, so let's take they are totally gender, race, color neutral, they will now report more crimes here than here, which means that this area is now judged as having more crime than this area. Now, if you seed that problem with color 1 generation, 2 generations, 3 generations ago, you are a proponent. You are taking that model forwards. And we pointed out to the school simply that Olivia hasn't been sent home with a book to read yet that has anything other than a white child in it. Now, I'm not saying, you know, there's movements called share the shelf and you should make sure of this, make sure of that. I'm not maybe smart enough to know the answer. Maybe I'm too white and too middle-aged to know the answer. But I know that my 5-year-old only being sent home books of blonde-haired, blue-eyed children is a symptom of, I don't know if you've, I think it was Malcolm X, or it could be Martin Luther King, I can't remember, I apologize. So there are 2 types of racism: there's fox racism and there's wolf racism. Wolf racism is the guys in the hoods, you can see them coming. And he said he wasn't that concerned, relatively speaking, about that, because you can see him coming and run the other way. He said it was the fox racism, the systemic racism, that more concerned him, because they creep into our bias and we accidentally become, his words, accidental advocates of a racist position. So I think, as you said, you have to challenge your own opinions. But what I'm really struggling with Olivia is everything that I've dealt with her so far has been explained, mapping it to something she understands. So it's normally been, why do they do this and we do this? It's like, well, you know, when you go around Alice's house, yeah, well, Alice's parents have different rules than Mum and Dad, don't they? Yeah. Well, this is the same. You know, these people have these rules, these people have these rules. And she goes, oh, okay. Right. And then we walk away, listening to what you, in one of our earlier conversations, where I only answer the question they ask and then shut up and run away. This is not one where I want to say, well, Olivia, some people disagree. Other people, I don't want to say, you know, Daddy and Mummy happen to think that black people are equal to white people, but other people think that black people are below white people. I don't want her to even have the slightest frame of reference that is an acceptable alternate belief. But when we're talking about religion, for example, I will teach her, you know, Daddy doesn't believe in a defined religion, Olivia, whereas other people believe in Allah, and other people believe in Buddha, and other people believe in Jesus, and nobody. And so, are you right, Daddy? No, I believe I'm right, but I don't believe I'm right at the expense of those other people's beliefs. We coexist, and that's a complex one. But this is not one where I want her. I'm not willing to say, Well, other people, obviously. I think,
You have
obviously.
a
I'm not
hard
willing to say other people have that.
You have a hard stop.
Yeah.
There is,
This is
there is,
absolutely no.
yeah, this is, you've hit the moment where this is no, that perspective, that therefore, you know, the color of a person's skin therefore makes them less than, is absolutely not a part of your dialogue or what is your accepted belief in your home, and not what you want your children to carry on with. That's fair. It would be the same as, I suspect, I don't believe that somebody should step into the street and shoot someone. That's not acceptable.
Yeah, and,
So,
if there is a nuance there, she can learn it herself in 20 years' time. But as far as
yeah.
I'm concerned, it's unacceptable. So she said, what happens if somebody's being nasty to somebody in school like that? And I said, I want you to walk to the headmaster's office, and I want you to ask the headmaster to call me, and I want you to tell the headmaster that you won't discuss it with them no matter what they say.
Mm-hmm.
And she went, sorry? And I said, if you're already seeing that, Olivia, and the teacher hasn't addressed it, then I don't want you to try and have that conversation. If the teacher's addressing it, I trust Miss Trevor.
Okay, I have a little bit of a different perspective. So
I'm
what
interested. So I'm having this conversation.
Right. So what if Olivia sees it on, let's say they're on the playground, and Olivia sees this, this moment of racial bias, and she is able to say to one of the children, hopefully the child who said it, you know, when you said that, it made so-and-so feel bad. And it made me feel bad because it wasn't kind.
So I hear you. I think you're probably right. I'm still not going to do it that way, because I believe if a 5-year-old is able to demonstrate racism, then I think there is an issue in the parenting.
Well, okay, you're taking a really long leap, right? What if in this school where children have only seen books and pictures and other children who are blonde-haired and blue-eyed, and they don't understand the difference, they're still exploring it, and all what they're saying is not necessarily a reflection of what the parent has put forth, but it's a reflection of the child's misunderstanding, not knowing. You're immediately assuming the worst. I tend not to go there first. And it's something else I want to say. You're also taking power away from Olivia, and you're giving it to someone else. Olivia, I would imagine you would never wish her to be a bystander, right? With Nazi Germany, we had a lot of bystanders. People didn't participate, but they watched, and they said nothing and they did nothing.
I do want her to be a bystander for the next 2 years. I don't think she has the cognitive capability right now to understand when to interject and when not to interject. I think she's very, very strong-willed. And I think she would literally be willing to turn around to a teacher and say, no, my daddy has told me how to deal with this. I literally think she would do that. So for the next couple of years, until she can evaluate the situation a bit better, I'd rather she remove herself from it. I'm going to be totally honest. Do I want her as a bystander in the forward progression? Absolutely not.
Yeah. I do have a different perspective. I think that children have incredible power to influence other children in positive ways that adults will not. Adults will make that a punitive moment when it might not have needed that. When it might be that the social interaction is enough to teach that child that what that child said, did, was wrong and could in fact be changed. And that peer-to-peer conversation can sometimes truly change things without magnifying them, without making them big, 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 big.
100%. I did some charity work for some bullying charities, and I was quite interested to find out that there's been a huge shift, and you'll know about this better than I do. There's been a huge shift in the last 10 years, and almost all anti-bullying initiatives now focus on everybody but the bully and the person being bullied. Yeah. Because the realization is that, you know, the bully is probably playing out his or her own traumas, and is in a very emotional place. The person that's bullying is certainly in an emotional place, but the 400 people watching it saying no this is not an acceptable way of doing it is enough to neutralize it far more effective than any teacher, any parent, the peer pressure of the rest of the class body saying no. I was like, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Often
this is the
the
same.
bully is bullying because that person has been bullied before. They're
Yep.
playing out a power struggle where they're trying to take the power that was taken from them.
Yeah, Sean Carey and I, one of our panelists, were talking about this in a similar vein a few weeks ago, and we said we both tried to recall any moment in our entire lives when somebody set out to deliberately harm us. So their intent was harm. And literally in 40 years, and I've run 3 businesses across multiple continents. Sean runs a very successful law firm that's been in thousands of conflicts. And neither of us could think of one single occasion when somebody woke up one morning and went, you know what, I'm going to screw Pete over this morning. Now, that might have been the outcome, but they were playing through their own thing. And they were trying to achieve something. They're either trying to walk away from one of their fears or walk away towards one of their wants. Normally walking away from one of their fears. And I think that's exactly the same to talk about here. You know, if anyone hears this, that there's being bullied, please reach out to a parent or to a teacher and talk about it, because I was quite badly bullied, and I can tell you at the time, what I'm saying does not resonate as true at all. It feels very much like somebody's trying to hurt you. And it feels very lonely, and it is not the case. The only reason you are alone is because currently you are seeking to be alone. And if you share your problem, it will get better, I promise. Sorry, that was just an interlude, and whenever I hear the word bullying, I say that little speech and then I move on. Okay, so let's wrap this up. So our final thoughts seem to be: engage in the conversation. Having the conversation and getting it slightly wrong is better than not having it at all. Trust in our children that they are resilient individuals. And don't shy away from it. I think as we're talking about, address it.
Yeah, don't avoid it. Stay calm, stay factual, validate a child's feelings, and encourage more and more questions. Because that's what's going to perpetuate the conversation and help them to develop that moral compass that you want them to have throughout life.
Yeah, I don't know if you remember, just a final thoughts, but I will pass back to you final thoughts a second. I might have had this conversation with you at the beginning or not. So when we formed Hack Mankind, we brought on advocates. We brought on advocates for people with disability, and I am still torn by this. And it was brought back up by this again. I got in a heated discussion with a friend of mine about this issue because I said the sentence, I am appalled that any human being can be murdered in that way. And he went, you mean a black person? And I went, no, I don't mean a black person. I mean a human being. And I really did feel like, and I've gone through the conversations a lot now, so I do understand a lot more of the perspective. I'm still never going to fully understand it. I can't empathize with it. I'm sorry. I'm white. I was born white, which means my ability to empathize is slightly limited. If we're talking about an issue of color, but if we're talking about an issue of humanity, my ability to empathize is 100%. I don't believe that any human being should ever be treated in that way. I don't believe that to me, I genuinely saw a person being bullied, abused, murdered, and pause. Murder is something that comes out of a legal process. The legal process is not finished. No matter how much we feel the evidence is a slam dunk, I believe in due process. I believe in innocent until proven guilty. Even if that video is insanely damning, jumping to the word murder is still a jump. Although I think it is going to be that. You look confused by that, Karen.
My eyes tell me. So my eyes tell me that man was murdered. I understand that the legal system will make that decision, But I don't think I personally need the legal system to tell me that. And what troubles me is for children all around the world who saw this, they watched a person be murdered.
Can I tell you why? Can I tell you why it's so important that we are careful with the use of the word? Right? Two reasons. First of all, there was a picture of a Cuban child that was washed up on a Miami beach about 15 years ago, and it was used as evidence of how appalling America was treating immigrants. The picture was a lie. And the reason I say that is because the child was face down in the soil, on the beach. Now, anybody that had seen a body on a beach would turn the body over. It's the first thing you do. First thing you do is look at the face and see if it was alive. So the body was then replaced back down for that picture to be taken. There's no way you'd walk up and go, oh, look, there's a corpse. I'm just going to take a picture. The first instinct would be to run across and say, is this person alive? I grew up in the Middle East. The Middle East does not believe in innocent till proven guilty. It believes in guilty till proven innocent. And it allows people to abuse positions of power by leveling false accusations at people that then put people in a situation where it's very hard to prove you didn't do something. It's often almost impossible to prove you're innocent, which is why our legal system has evolved to innocent till proven guilty. So I agree with you. I believe he was murdered. I believe it was disgusting, appalling, but there is a difference between the word I believe and it was. And it was is what happens when judges and lawyers reach that conclusion. However, I do agree with you. I believe it.
Fair enough, but I believe that that's what children saw.
I agree.
And I believe that it is a critical moment for every parent who is raising a child who saw that.
I agree. And the harder thing for us to explain to our children right now, from my side, is actually three things. And one of them, thank God she doesn't know. First of all, she knows it was a policeman. Right. Daddy, should I trust the police? No, Olivia, you shouldn't. I believe it's true for me to say no, you shouldn't. But I think it says a whole lot about society when I'm telling my daughter not to trust the police. That's problem number one. Problem number two, the cartoid restraint is a mandated way of doing it. I was gobsmacked when I heard that. Yes. How can you possibly believe that's a good idea? And the one that she doesn't know, which is actually in some ways the worst part of it for me, is the gap in the arrest of the officer and the gap in the arrest of the three officers watching I actually believe it is a larger problem. Mm-hmm. Because that means it wasn't just one individual whose actions I would never justify, and I condone in every word that comes out of me, I would condone what happened. Mm-hmm. But the actions of the people above that didn't take action says that we have a systemic problem. Yeah. And I would actually like to see arrest warrants for the people that didn't issue arrest warrants.
Arrest warrants, yeah.
I would like to say you're obviously perverting the course of justice, because if any other person sent that video into you of anybody else, you'd have arrested them.
Right.
So why didn't you arrest them?
Right. And these are all the things as parents that we have to face. These are all the things as parents that we have to really process for ourselves, spend a great deal of time thinking about and preparing for, and then be ready to listen to our children, answer their questions, peppered with the moral lessons. So that's what I believe. Getting back to Olivia's school, I absolutely believe that any school that does not provide for diversity in across their curriculum and across the experiences that children have are in a sense contributing to
I think accidentally from a place of beauty, but their goal is innocent, but it's naive. You have to, if you've got a system that's off by 10%. To get back to zero, you have to course correct by 10%. You know, my father and I had an argument in Dubai once. They introduced a sugar tax on carbonated drinks from fast food companies. And they banned like Coke, Pepsi, 7-Up, etc. in children's Happy Meals. And I was 18 or so, and I railed against this. I'm like, this is an outrage. This my freedoms, my liberties. I should be able to choose. Da, da, da. Why should I? Why? And this is one of those arguments that went on for years. You know, every so often we dropped into it and discussed it again, until my dad managed to say a sentence that I really understood. He turned around and said, sometimes it's the duty of the strong and privileged to suffer for the weak. And I went, what? And he went, yes, you know better. You know that if you go and drink a Coke, you should brush your teeth. You know that your children may be able to have one Coca-Cola a week and not on the other days and still be okay. Because you're of an education level where you can understand and put these things together. But that's not true of everybody. Sometimes the strong and privileged must suffer for the weak. And it is exactly the same conversations I've then had with my wife around female empowerment, where I've been saying, well, if you want to take some of the, if you want to say women have these amount of rights, you're essentially going to have to take some of mine away from me to get this back leveled. And I didn't do anything wrong. And that same conversation comes back out. Yeah, sometimes the strong and privileged have to suffer for the weak. And it's maybe not a palatable option. Anyway, let's try and bring this back.
I mean, we could talk all day about this.
We can, and we do. But sadly, there are other things that need to be done. Karen, thank you so much for joining us. For everybody watching, you've been listening to Karen Giuffre, our education and childhood panelist for www.hackmankind.com. And my name is Peter Swain, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks, Karen.
Thanks, Peter.
Cheers. Bye-bye.